Hello, everyone. Welcome to Travel Massive, our live show from Toronto. My name is Christina. I'm the co-organizer for the chapter here. Great to see so many of you joining us from around the world. Let us know where you guys are watching us from today. Ping us down below in the live chat. I see so far we've got plenty of people from Toronto and New York. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you have any trouble hearing us or with audio, feel free to just ping us below and let us know, and we'll try to adjust that. Thank you for spending the next hour with us today. We're actually talking about Instagram marketing. I'm really excited. It's of all the social networks out there, Instagram really is the most impactful, I think, channel to market your business and your product. So get out your pen and paper. There's going to be lots of really good info today that you'll want to jot down. This session is especially valuable, I think, if you're going to be working with brands, or maybe you already plan to work with brands, if you're a content creator, or maybe you're a brand yourself with future campaigns, or want to learn how to create product partnerships with influencers. Of course, we're also going to have a live Q&A. At any time during the show, you can post your questions down below in the live chat box for the speaker. And if you're watching us on Facebook, you can also ask your questions there. Okay, so let's get started. Our special guest today is Tara Edwards. She is a digital strategist and a luxury hotel expert behind the blog Lux Turista. In a few short years, she has grown her Instagram platform to about 140,000 followers. She's worked with a number of hotel and travel brands like the Four Seasons, the Shangri-La, and Tara joins us from Toronto today, so I'll bring her in. Hi, Tara.
Hey, thanks, Christina. Thanks for the intro.
Thanks for joining us today.
Of course. I'm more than happy to. I'm excited to be part of this community. I know you and I connected a few times in the past, and finally it's been able to work. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to share my story.
Awesome. Now, for those who don't know your story and don't know about you, tell us a bit about where you came from, how you started, and how you've grown your Instagram, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so my travel passion sort of started as a hobby. I actually previously was in the finance industry for about 10 years after university. Throughout my career, I always traveled. It was sort of like a work, save, travel, repeat sort of cycle that I was continuously doing with my husband and I. So I came to a point where, I was doing a lot for free. It was more just, me sharing, what I would call my commitment to the internet, because, I take so much from it. And so I would, post in forums like TripAdvisor, write different blog posts, or just really contribute like my experience within the travel industry on different forums. So I was doing that alongside my banking career, and there came to a point where I was starting to get more and more opportunities that were either beginning to be paid, or just more comped travel or comped like benefits, where I came to a point where I was like, I can continue to work in this industry, that finance industry, where I sort of know the trajectory, I know where this is going, I sort of see the future, or dive into this world of the unknown, and really essentially take a risk and explore the world of travel, and maybe try to create more of an income with what I'm passionate about. So yeah, that was all great up until, of course, 2020 with the pandemic. But regardless, I mean, I think it's still a great industry to be in for the future. I'm trying to keep things alive for the most part. I do have a baby now that, I probably wouldn't have even thought about having children when I was in the finance world. So it's sort of opened horizons for me that, I never really considered. And so, yeah, I'm starting to incorporate sort of family travel into my blog, and like I said, sort of keep it alive during the pandemic, so that, come 2021, hopefully when we're able to travel again, I can get momentum and, sort of focus on that business again.
Cool. And in terms of Instagram, was that sort of something you fell into by accident through your business?
Yeah. So I was not a creative person whatsoever. It was more just me having an outlet aside from my private Instagram, where I would share my photos. And I started to gain community, and I started to get to a point where I saw sort of how growth was possible. And so I would share my pictures. I started learning more about photography, which I literally had no idea about. through, YouTube. And then I, started using Skillshare and a number of other platforms that sort of help you with your creative, development, I would say. And then, I learned photography, learned editing, figured out sort of what would it take to make a very like cohesive, pretty looking feed. I sort of just went from there. And yeah, my Instagram grew, especially as I started to learn the ins and outs of the algorithm, which I'll plan to touch on. And yeah, I grew essentially pretty quickly in the beginning, because Instagram used to be a lot easier, I'd say, for growth. Not that it isn't still pretty easy to grow as long as you know what you're doing. But yeah, I grew rapidly, and it sort of helped open the door for a lot of opportunities that I had, as you mentioned, like with the Four Seasons, which was a hotel that I had always had pretty strong loyalty to and had always stayed at prior to posting my pictures for an income. And so yeah, like it really opened a lot of doors, and I'll sort of tell you guys ways to pitch yourself, how you price your service, how to then of course grow within Instagram, but also grow your business on Instagram. So yeah.
Cool. Well, on that note, okay, so I'm going to leave you to chat, and then I'll come back a little later and help facilitate any questions. So if anyone out there is watching and wants to ask some questions, feel free, and we'll get to as many as we can today. I'm sure there'll be many of them.
Great.
All right, we'll see you in a bit.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess I'll start with sort of like how it evolved into me really generating an income from Instagram. So I'd say, like any business, you need to start somewhere with, some form of investment, whether it's, your time or, monetary commitment. But really for me, it was starting to do things for free because I was already traveling. I was already staying at these hotels. I would, take away from my vacation from work to really focus on, photography and taking pictures at, the different hotels and resorts that I was staying at. And so for me, that was, a creative outlet that I had. I tapped into this creative side I didn't even really know that I had. And like I said, started doing this for free. So, as I started doing these things for free, creating blog posts for hotels, posting photos that, were reposted by, the Four Seasons main site, or sorry, main Instagram page or the local one. It started growing, and it was more valuable for me to sort of feel like I, was getting recognition in that space. So, as I said, I was still working, and things sort of developed into a way where I started getting, comped meal plans at a place that I would stay, or it evolved into getting comped rooms in exchange for Instagram posts. And then I got to a point in about, I'd say, mid 2018 where I started getting offered, a dollar amount for sharing, my blog posts or sharing my images, and really just, other things even outside of the Instagram world. So whether it was, me coming to a property and taking photos for their new menu or photos for digital campaigns that they had. There was always something that maybe could come up in addition to Instagram. So yeah, that's sort of where it started and how it evolved and how I began to make an income. And at that point of intersection with, the career that I was in at the time and what I was doing on the side, I came to a point where I thought, maybe I should explore this full time, because who wouldn't want to travel full time, of course. And so, yeah, I sort of took it from there, and yeah, it's been great ever since. So I guess what I'll cover, I've already sort of spoke about how I began to make an income, but I will talk about how you pitch yourself, how you really price your services, because there's, a lot of ambiguous detail out there of like, how you should price your service. And I think that the travel niche is a lot different from any other industry in that you're not just marketing something. You're not just, have a product or being sent a product. You actually get to experience, traveling and, an experience at a property that, is a form of payment, I would say. So it takes away from the overall dollar value, I would say. And then lastly, I'll cover sort of growing on Instagram and like understanding the algorithm and some of the things that worked for me and that continue to. So yeah. So circling back to as I said, pitching yourself. You really need to start with a media kit. So what a media kit would be is really a page, 1 page, 2 pages that describes you, really, what your story is and what your professional story is and what you plan to do professionally with them, the equipment that you use. So for me, I'll detail, the professional equipment that I have, whether it's drone photography that I can provide or, really whatever it is that I, use and can use for the different, campaigns that they have. I also include my demographics. So that's really important for hotels to see sort of where your audience is and if they're, male, female, things like that. So geographical, audience, as well as your demographic, and then any analytics. So, what my impression count per month would be, what my engagement rate is, just a number of things that really help them see the value in what you can provide to them. I also detail who I've worked with in the past. Typically with the hotels that I do work with, it's become really referral based where, I can ask for a referral or they'll refer me to another property that, earlier this year, I was invited to a property that just had a renovation. So they wanted to showcase the new look of the hotel and sort of reach a demographic that was a little bit younger than what they typically see at the property. So, little things like that where I can highlight who I've worked with in the past, and sort of what I've done for them in the past to really help with the media kit. And then, anything that else you think highlights, what you're good at, your skill set, including it into 1 page and, essentially being your pitch, is really helpful to have. So that sort of goes into a package, I'd say, of like an email where you can, write an email to pitch yourself. You typically write something along the lines of, hi, I'm Tara. I love this brand. I'm, really committed to my loyalty with this brand. I've, traveled, in multiple locations where you can say, you've worked with XYZ hotels. And essentially say like, I'm coming to the area, or I would be interested to come to the area. Do you have any, current like campaigns or marketing needs that, I can assist with, and, go from there. And so I typically don't sort of carve out a price or carve out, what I think they need me to do. I'll have an open-ended discussion where I can kind of say, hey, here's what I can offer. But I'm open to sort of like working with you as well to see sort of what you need. And, maybe my skill set can provide an asset for you. So then that typically will result in an open dialogue of some sort of saying, hey, we don't actually have a need for this now, but potentially in the next few months, we can talk about a campaign that we're doing, and maybe we can use your skill set for, this particular campaign. And so I will, either pitch a hotel that way, or hotels will approach me and I will share a media kit or share any of the, posts that I've done for that brand. And then, I sort of say, here are other services that I can offer outside of social media or my blog. So those being, as I said, taking photos for maybe a menu, new bar menu, which I've done before. Helping with digital content creation for their digital marketing ads, whether they're, creating an image for Facebook or, when you see these sponsored ads, photos for that. They typically have, a set group of photographers, or sometimes they even have in-house photographers that they'll work with. But I think they like to have variety when they try to switch things up. And so, anything that you can offer in terms of, supporting their digital needs is really helpful. I will typically do something like that. And a hotel, if they choose that they would like to work with me, that's great. Sometimes it's just simply a comped trip and I'm able to experience the hotel and experience the, country and culture that I go to. And, I do that in exchange for Instagram posts. There's a number of ways to sort of pitch yourself and pitch your services. And really you just have to figure out, what your value add to the hotel is. Mine is typically, the photography that I can offer, alongside, exposure on Instagram. And then of course, like blog posts where I, can provide my website traffic and sort of show them guests I've interacted with where they sort of ask me, hey, what's a better hotel to visit in Thailand? Is Six Senses better or Four Seasons better? And I can sort of like, highlight to a potential guest why they, should choose either or. So that's, I'd say, sort of like pitching. So I have a question here. How large was your account when you started getting offers? Really good question. I'd say in and around the 10,000 mark is when I started realizing that I could get offers. I was traveling in Santorini, and I was doing this for fun. It was more just like my hobby. I was working at the time. It was like in 2017. And so, yeah, I had been in Santorini. I had been posting from a hotel that I was staying at, and I was paying to stay there. And, it was sort of like me just visiting and had nothing to do with, them inviting me or anything like that. But so I posted a couple of pictures, and then the hotel that I was staying at, they were like, oh, that's you that is posting those pictures. Why don't we have some form of exchange? And so they ended up comping our meals that we had through our like 5-day stay, which ended up being a pretty hefty amount in the end, in exchange for photos and just for exposure. And then we did a video together. And so, yeah, I'd say like the 10,000 mark is when I started realizing, I should say, that there was more to it. I do think earlier on you could, but as I said before, like this was just my hobby. I did it for sheer enjoyment for myself. But yeah, if you have something that you can offer, I do think that, you can start it anywhere. If you have great photography skills, you only have a following of 3,000, 5,000, there's no reason that, you couldn't already get something or get an offer from that. Another question here. Do you find it beneficial to include an Instagram posting rate? No, I don't. So I was going to get to that with the pricing of your services. So I'll jump right into that anyway, but I do not find it beneficial for that whatsoever, because I find that each property, even if they're under the Four Seasons banner, they all have their own individual budget. Some have no budget whatsoever. So all they can really provide to you is like a complimentary stay. I think that if you're initially emailing a hotel and you're saying, hey, this is what I can offer you, I would never put a price in it, because they might completely ignore, what you're offering, because you are already essentially assigning a dollar value to it. It might be within their budget, or they may not have a budget at all for that. So I think that, opening the dialogue and then negotiating from there really helps. Typically they'll ask, what is your rate? But I would say that in a lot of situations with hotels anyway, the posts that you put on Instagram are typically exchanged for your stay. And this stay could be, a $5,000 stay, but you will not get paid that $5,000, because typically with these luxury hotel brands, from what I've noticed, they don't like to show that they've put a sponsored or a paid influencer within their hotel, because I feel like it attracts more and more people thinking that, they can also do that. And then they become inundated with, requests and media requests, as I've heard from some of these properties. So yeah, I wouldn't put a rate. I would if, the conversation eventually leads there, and you can say, hey, I'll offer, 3 Instagram posts for a comped night, say, so like 2 nights, maybe 6 posts. And then from there you can say, but I also offer these services, and, these are my rates. Does any of this sound good to you while I'm there? I mean, it's not all encompassing. I'd say every hotel is different. Every PR team is different, and their needs are different. But to answer the question, I wouldn't include a dollar sign immediately in the initial pitch. I'd sort of let the conversation evolve before you do that. Okay, so I guess now jumping into pricing your services. So yeah, typically, as I said, with travel, you are offered, in the beginning, you could be offered a media rate, so a discounted rate, or, comped nightly rate in return for photos. Starting out, I would say, in that, when I was at that 10,000 mark and started realizing, hey, you know what, I can get something out of this. I can get something out of my following. I can get something out of my passion. I started to then, at that point, sort of pitch myself and say, hey, I'm coming to Tulum, for example. I would love to stay at your property. Would you be happy to do, media rate, which is sometimes discounted to even less than 50%, which is nice. For a property that maybe a $600 a night hotel, they might give it to you for $250 a night, which is really nice to have, especially when you're starting out, because not only can you start to build your portfolio of photos and posts that you can put on Instagram marketing this hotel, but you can also, showcase what you can do and stay at a great property for, a lesser rate offering services. I'd say that is sort of like a baseline of where you'd start with a smaller following. And then I think what you kind of see online is that they say for every 10,000 followers you have, typically your rate per post should be $100. And now I don't really agree with that from a travel standpoint, because as I've said, they will sort of exchange nightly stays, food packages, etc., which have a greater value often in exchange for posts. But from a external industry, like let's say it's fashion, or I've worked with Skillshare before, where it's something that I feel passionate about because I've learned a lot from Skillshare, but they will offer a completely different rate than what the travel industry will. That baseline that you might see online where it says, if for every 10,000 followers you have, it should be $100 post. I wouldn't follow that guideline. I think that what you need to do is sort of figure out, first of all, where you're at. So how big is your following? What kind of influence do you have? How great are your photography skills? Because I think everybody sort of starts somewhere. And then assign a value to that for yourself. So, for me, I would say, whatever my hourly rate is, I would figure that out and decide, okay, this hotel is asking for 10 to 20 photos that I'd offer the rights to. So you'd enter sort of a contract agreement where you take these photos, but you actually hand over the rights to the hotel to use in any way or form that they choose, and any timeline that they choose. So, it's often happened where I'll take photos and I don't see them for another year when they decide to use them. But yeah, and they don't have to give you credit for these photos. They've completely, take over the rights of owning them. I'm trying to lost my train of thought here, but I guess what I'm getting at is that once they sort of, take these photos, they're able to do, whatever they'd want for them. But I sort of think of how much time is it going to take me to not only get the shots, but then, post-production, so the editing. And then if it is going to Instagram, how much time am I actually having to spend in the app on, like getting the photo up, engaging with the following based on the post, and, all of those things, and sort of come up with a dollar value based on what I'd expect per hour. I think that sort of evolves as you grow, not only your online presence with Instagram, but as you grow professionally. So I can say for sure, since 2018 to now, my photography skills have increased vastly because, I guess what they say is the more hours you spend on something, or, if you spend 10,000 hours on something, you somewhat become a professional at it. So, I say you start at a lower number for, what your value is. And then as you start to see yourself evolve in a professional way, that dollar value goes up. And then of course your following will go up naturally because, you're evolving as well. And the time commitment really does pay off. It doesn't matter what you do. I think the more time that you put into it, the greater the benefit, or the greater, you sort of see the reward. I guess back to a pricing standpoint, if you are really thinking of what your dollar value is just think of what, your skill level is and, evolve from there. I think one of the other questions that I was talking to Christina about was, how do you sort of like get into that branded content sort of ad space, and what are the rules with brands? From a hotel standpoint, I haven't really been asked in any way to do like a branded content. I'm very upfront with my insights. So I typically will screenshot my insights, being impressions, reach, saves, and all of these other variables, and send them to them directly within, the first 24 hours or, after a week, because of course it continues to grow as, the post is up. So I would typically, share this information. And I think that when you are doing a branded content or doing, when you see sponsored by or whatever at the top of somebody's post where they're doing something that, they're being paid for, I don't typically see it done for the travel space, because I think, as I said earlier on, what happens is hotels will exchange their nightly rates or a comped stay in exchange for Instagram posts. But then if you go above and beyond what that agreement is, that's when you can start asking for, a dollar value for your services. And I think, as I said, they do that so that they don't sort of display that they're paying people to come travel, because I don't think that they really want to show that, hey, we're paying people to come travel, so why doesn't everybody come do this? So yeah, for branded content, I think the rules are slightly more loose around the travel industry, because it's typically they're not saying, hey, we're paying you to do this. Similar to, I get asked to do a TripAdvisor review or a blog post, and I often cannot be paid for that as well, because it's going to be my subjective opinion, especially with TripAdvisor. You cannot get paid for a review like that, because of course it would make the whole form biased. But when it comes to a blog post, if you add photography or you add a lot of detail that really helps the traveler, I do think that there is payment that can be collected there. And of course I've been paid for blog posts, but again, you have to think back of, what's my time investment with this, the photography wise, writing, the editing, all of these things. What is, my typical blog post takes me 5 hours. So I would come up with a number that's really what do I value my 5 hours of time for? And coming from the banking world, that's sort of how, consultants that we've worked with, or anybody that we'd work with externally that was providing a service, would sort of value their time and their rates. So I've sort of like used my corporate experience there to come up with a number where I, would feel comfortable doing that amount of work for. For some brands, I'd sometimes do it just to strengthen our relationship. And I'm happy to sort of like, add more to it so that I can, eventually make more and, gain more rapport with a brand. And in a lot of the brands that I've worked with, it sort of started that way, where I would do a lot for free. I'd say quite a bit, and really prove to them, what I can offer and, really what my services can be. And then I think that through that relationship building, it got me a lot of referrals to other properties. It got me a lot of paid opportunities, because I became somebody that had a good relationship with them, where they relied on the work that I would do, and knew that I would go above and beyond to provide sort of what they needed for free, and then again for any contract that we'd have that would have value. So I haven't, the hardest part is getting flight sponsored. That is absolutely true. I've never, ever been comped flights, which makes it really challenging. And so typically, if it's a paid contract that I would be doing with a hotel, I will build that cost or some form of that cost into what my rate would be. So I'd say that if you do want to be working within the travel space, and you do want to not only get like comped travel, but also your flights as well, the best that I've seen so far is working with tourism boards, because they do have a budget for that. I worked with a tourism board a couple times. It's not really my niche, because I like to do more hotel based versus destination based. So when you go, when you work with a tourism board, you basically are, coming to show an island or show a country, less of the hotel. And they will put you in a hotel, and, often, for me anyway, it's not going to be a Four Seasons. It's not going to be, a Six Senses, a Mandarin Oriental, which is what I've sort of showcased as my niche. So if you're like me and you exclusively work with hotels, like if you check out my Instagram feed, I don't really do destination-based photos. I do specifically hotels. And that's why I think I have the opportunity to work with hotels, because I don't water down my feed with, hey, here are posts in this destination. I'm showcasing this particular property in a location. And so I steer away from the tourism boards, and I actually don't get approached by many either, because I am very like heavily niched in luxury hotels. But yes, if you want to get your flights sponsored or your flights paid for, I'd say hotels will not. They do not have a budget for that, but tourism boards will typically. So yeah, I guess going back to the pricing your services, there is another whole world of income that you can sort of delve into once you have a bigger following. That could be anything from, I not only do I, share the Instagram posts, and that would be sort of a way to generate income, but I also, advise on guest loyalty programs, because I've been to so many properties. I sort of have, an expertise that's unique in a way that I can sort of compare an experience at one luxury hotel to another and provide a PR team or management team with tips on how they can improve a customer experience or a guest experience. So I've had a lot of opportunity doing that, which has sort of played on my skill set from my corporate experience, where I was like heavily focused on data and analytics and client strategy. So I've been able to sort of like segue that into, hey, I'm an expert in this space, but I can actually advise on how you guys can improve your, customer relationship management, loyalty experience, if that's a thing for a hotel. Generally, I've been working with the Four Seasons because they don't have a loyalty program, but they want to make a more tailored experience for a guest that comes with them, where they're recognized as a client of the brand versus just the hotel. So, there's a number of ways to also generate an income where, like, you've already established yourself as, X person within, Instagram, but you can sort of like branch out to, make an income in other ways. Other ways I have made an income is, mentoring others. I've just released my presets, which I think you guys probably have all seen presets online, where I think I'm like late to this party, but I've, having a baby and everything else that comes along with that is really sort of like set me back a little bit in terms of like the time that I have to commit to things that aren't making money for me at the time. And then I've also done, like, as I said, with mentorships, I also help people create their media kits or their blogs, or just really help the like mentor, giving like ins and outs of the Instagram space and sort of how to grow. And so I've done that with a few friends, as well as some people that sort of were referred to me, a lot based in Toronto. So that's been helpful. So we can sort of at one point meet face to face and sort of like put heads together that way. But at this point, of course, there's no face to face meeting. And yeah, so I see another question here. Do you partner with travel agents to book destinations for your followers? Very good question. I absolutely have. I have a woman in Toronto that I have dealt with, and I also have one in Bangkok that I have dealt with, because I had a trip to Thailand that just became, I guess, like somewhat viral on my blog, where I think a lot of people, especially that are traveling to Thailand and they want to have a luxury experience, are always torn between which of these two properties, Four Seasons or Six Senses, they should stay at. So I've had a number of requests come through where, people have asked me, what would you, this is what I like as a traveler, what would you say is a better hotel for me to stay at? I always say try both, but I mean, some people don't want to do that. They just want to go and stay somewhere for 2 weeks, and that's sort of what their choice is. And so I'll understand them as a traveler, and then I will, I really advise on like, here's the highlights at each property, and here's why I think you'll like this one over this one. And then to answer your question, Christina, I have worked with, as I said, a travel agent in Bangkok that we've connected over Instagram. And then another one in Toronto where I've just happened to be in like a business group with them, where it just made sense for us. And so, yeah, I typically just do that for no monetary value, more for my audience or for my following, just to give them like a good experience and to sort of help them book their travel. Because I think that probably for all of us, I would say that travel is just so easy to navigate, and we like get it, and we can do it on our own, or we sort of like do our own research, but we really understand. But I feel like there's a lot of people out there that just like are so lost when it comes to understanding where to go, how to book their flights, how to do all of this. And it's not a service that I offer, but if I can say, if I can advise somebody to go to a property that I've been to, and work with their, reservation team to sort of get that worked out, then I can, advise that they work with a travel agent to help them navigate the rest of it. So yeah, I do that. I've thought about sort of like doing that more and sort of telling my following that, hey, this is a service that I offer, but right now we're not traveling, and it's a time commitment that I just haven't really, been able to iron out now that I'm sort of back working. So yeah, I think what time do we have? A little bit more time left. So I'll now sort of like delve into the growing on Instagram and understanding the algorithm aspect of Instagram. So I would say Instagram sort of evolving in a way that is less about beautiful photos and more about substance and what you can offer. And I'm finding that, a lot of viral posts have some form of information or have something really valuable that, is just outside of the pretty image. That isn't to say that the image matters or doesn't matter. Sorry, it absolutely does. And, I think that from a photography standpoint and a post-processing standpoint, you do have to have, a very pretty looking, cohesive looking Instagram in order to attract a following. Because of course people do still, rely on seeing the images, but I do find more and more that, if you have a value add where in the travel space, you are an expert when it comes to, European vacations, and, you can offer the top 5 things to do in every single country. I think that, combining that, like a value add with photography, really helps growth now. Whereas when I first started, it was just getting a nice image up and there was, nothing more to it. Your picture went viral because people saw a pretty image and they, wanted to follow it or wanted to continue following you. So I think that, combining both is really important. From a photography standpoint, it's really hard to, for me anyway, it's really hard for me to learn really the creative aspect of photography because I've always been the complete opposite. I've, was a math brain. I've always was in the banking industry and finance. And so tapping into this was a passion, but I wasn't the greatest at it from the get-go. So, I used things like, YouTube, of course, for videos to like understand, perspective and, how to compose a good photo. And then it evolved to like, how to take great drone images, how to, do video editing, etc. So just sort of like self-evolvement in that and, being able to understand what it takes from a photography standpoint and then evolving to how to edit these things. So I would say from an editing standpoint, I've used Skillshare from a learning perspective, sort of like how to use different editing apps. I had no idea how to use, Lightroom or Photoshop or, any of these other apps. I kind of just had apps on my phone where I could apply a filter or, just edited it like with the simple Apple editing tools. But the more I learned, I think the further I grew because I found that, my images were looking better and better. And, I created this cohesive feed where it looked aesthetically pleasing. And so I think that if people come across your page, which I can sort of get to ways to bring them into your page, but if people come across your page and they see something that's visually appealing to them, they'll sort of gravitate. And then I find now it's less, like I said, about the images. People will go into images and sort of, see what value add you're giving them. Admittedly, I haven't been doing too much of the value add lately just because I have the little one and I'm not traveling and I'm not able to sort of, create new content at this point. But I now seeing sort of how Instagram is evolving, it's more of like, what do you have to offer? Plus your images, of course. And so from a growth standpoint, I found it and I still find it very important to engage. It's easy to just put a photo up and sort of say, okay, I'm just going to figure out how many likes I have, how many comments, etc. But the key to growth is engaging with your following, and not only your following, but engaging with, accounts that you sort of look up to, or that are your idols on Instagram, or, that you really support or feel like a connection with. And I'll tell you why. So a lot of where I started, I started out at, 0 followers and started to grow a community. So not only with, other influencers or, other accounts that were of the same size as me at that time, but also with big accounts that, you wouldn't expect to get a response from, or you wouldn't expect that they'd engage back with you. But the more that they see you and see you commenting or see you liking their posts or engaging with them, there's a form of reciprocation that starts to happen. And I found this a lot. So I would engage with accounts that, I sort of looked up to as like, I love how their images look. I love, the places that they go to, etc. And so by engaging with them, I eventually, grew the relationship virtually, where they would sort of give me a follow back. And so I started to be embedded into this space where it was a community, but we all sort of like, people that I started at were growing together. And so now, where I started, let's say 10,000 followers, those that I was engaging with at the same level of that I was are also at 100 plus now, or they're, some of them have even grown to 1 million followers now. And so we've, you start out with this community, and you start with, a group that's sort of the same size as you, but you also engage with accounts that are greater, like, they're larger than you, because once they start to see and you build a relationship with them, and of course, naturally that will happen, you often will get, them commenting back on your posts, or them, engaging with you, or maybe even following you, which sort of brings your page into their stronger community, from an algorithm standpoint, that is. So I don't know if anybody notices, but the more, like, the accounts that you engage most with are the ones that always come up to the top of your feed, because they find that, there's like a connection. The algorithm sort of believes that that's your friend, or that's like, an account that you want to see. And so the same goes for the other side. If they follow you back and you're the one, like, it's a larger account, say, and you're the one constantly commenting on their post, then they also will see your post. Like, it will come up in their feed. And then, if an account, for me, if an account with a following of 1 million likes my post, it's easier for my account to go more or my photo to go more viral, because a larger account with a larger following is, reciprocating what I've sort of been giving over and over. So I find that, there is this like unspoken form of reciprocation within Instagram that is being the best growth tool, I would say, for me anyway, to sort of embed me in that travel community, but also, push my posts out to like a greater following. And then of course, growing with your peers, your peer accounts that are at the same level, where, you guys start at, 5,000 followers together, and then you guys sort of, continue, and you've had this relationship, as I said, virtual relationship, where, you continually engage with each other, and you sort of grow together and embed yourself in this community. Often what I find is that these accounts that I have grown with from the beginning when I started, they have gotten to a point where some are even larger than me. And it's great because if somebody follows them, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when you follow somebody, it immediately suggests who else you should follow. And that connection is sort of made by, as I've said, building that community and really telling the algorithm, these are accounts that are very similar to mine. Like, these are the ones I'm engaging with. They're engaging with me. So at the end of the day, Instagram thinks that you guys are akin, or, one of the same. So that's really helpful. I find that, if I get new followers, I sort of sometimes will look and see who else are they following. And then I realize, okay, so they've went and followed a lot of accounts in the luxury hotel space, or they followed female bloggers, or sometimes I've found like, oh, they're following other mom travelers recently. So it's important to sort of like, stay active with that virtual community and continue to engage, and like, always like their stuff, always comment, and it will sort of reciprocate back. I think it always does. If you find though that you're doing that over and over for an account, you get nothing back, focus your time elsewhere on an account that typically will, and I typically find that most do. Like, you can comment every post that they have, and they see that you have a form of allegiance or loyalty to them, and they sort of give back, I found. And then I guess another major growth tip is really understanding how your analytics and hashtags can really work for you. So I'll pause that for a second. So I have another question from Judy. Am I part of any engagement pods on Instagram? I'm not, and I'll tell you that I was. I think that it was helpful in the beginning. It then became unhelpful. So I found that, I think I probably exited them maybe a year into doing it. It's really hard to catch up, and I think Instagram eventually finds that they're very inauthentic, because they truly are. I think from an engagement perspective, authenticity is probably the most important thing. And again, I should probably elaborate. When you do engage with an account that's larger than yours, you don't want to simply put "great shot." You want to, make a substantial, or, a comment that has substance to it, so that it is recognized and it is sort of valued by the person that you are adding it on. I think now, as far as for what I'm heard, Instagram, the algorithm is like very aware of these engagement pods, and I have heard that they have a negative effect on you. I would say that if you are going to use them, there's other areas to do it. So Telegram was one that I had used before, and then WhatsApp groups as well. But I think that it's just easier to build this community and just have like an unspoken pod, kind of, if that makes sense, where you have a community, you have your friends, you have like, accounts that are very similar to yours, and you just have this unspoken, like, hey, every time you post, I'm going to be active with your post, and every time I post, I kind of expect the same. And it goes back to what I said about the reciprocation. Kind of just naturally happens. And so the need for pods is sort of, it becomes not so much a necessity, but I think you can just avoid it. And especially if it's true that Instagram sort of like has a negative value on that, because I'm sure they can see posts or links dropped in, their messages in groups, then yeah, I'd just stay away from it and just do it from a unspoken way. So yeah, I guess going back to like the analytics and the hashtag use. So what I found really works for me is from a hashtag standpoint, I have done a lot of research in terms of like how they work. And I don't know if everybody sees this, but from my perspective with my business account anyway, I can actually see how many impressions I get from hashtags. And so I've tweaked them quite a bit. And I found what works for me the best is finding sort of like brackets of hashtags where, I go from a very broad perspective to a very niche perspective down to a very perspective. So broad being, I'll hashtag travel. Of course, there's like, millions of hashtags in that area, but it still helps because it's a more followed hashtag. From a niche perspective one, I'll go down to like luxury travel, because that's my niche, or luxury hotel, luxury villa. And then lastly, from a very photo specific one, I'll hashtag, specific things about the photo. So, if it's a hotel, they have their own hashtag where like Six Senses has out of the ordinary. I'll put out of the ordinary. There's not many hashtags in that category, but it will get me viewed by the hotel, and then chances that I'll be reposted that way. Or even, that community that stays at Six Senses, or potential followers that love that brand and they don't follow me, will maybe go to that hashtag and then see my post and then come follow me because that's a hotel that I frequent. I do find that, using that 10-10 rule has really helped me. I typically get, I would say, anywhere from like 20,000 to like 100,000 impressions by hashtags. There used to be a way that it would tell me which hashtags were getting it, but I've since lost that feature. I'm not really sure why, but I did use that quite well. And I found that the more engagement that I would have on a larger hashtag like travel, the more that all the other smaller ones would sort of like get me more views, if that makes sense. I'm not really sure why that would happen that way. I think mostly because if people in their feed, like I follow hashtags, I follow Four Seasons hashtag, I follow other hashtags. And so if I see posts there where I like them, I will of course engage with them. And then I have found sort of, that for my posts anyway, if I get likes from seeing or being seen in people's feeds, then my hashtags, my smaller hashtags, get more views. So yeah, I've sort of stick with that structure: 10, 10, 10, broad, niche, and specific. And then I add, of course, location. I add tags. I don't go crazy with the tags because I find that doesn't really help as much. I'll typically tag the hotel, tag the brand, and tag maybe myself or something, or the destination. But yeah, those, I think that understanding the hashtags and how they work for you and tweaking it where they're not working for you really is effective. And then, like, to that point, understanding your analytics is crucial. So you'll often find you might think that your post is fantastic, but you didn't get the impressions that were needed. So you have to understand, like, okay, maybe I didn't post at the right time. Maybe, I didn't use the right hashtags. Maybe, there's a whole ton of variables that go into that. So what I would say is, like, start to change up your style a bit. Sometimes people are putting in, save this post for future reference. And the algorithm sort of values each of these things, what people can do in a like hierarchy, I would say, similar to TikTok, where if you watch a video for longer than the 3 seconds that they think assigned to it, then that's their way of telling that their algorithm, like, hey, people are actually watching this video. That's step one. So Instagram's sort of the same. So if people come on your picture and they spend, I think, over 5 seconds on it, so they're looking at it, they're spending over 5 seconds looking at it, not just scrolling past and liking, that's a point of value. So yeah, the aesthetically pleasing photo really helps because people will spend time, like, really looking at it and appreciating it. Saving it is, I think, the next in the list, because I think that if people save it, it means that it really hit home for them and they want to come back to it at another point. Sharing it. So if you put some valuable information there, or I've noticed for me, it's a property that doesn't really have much exposure, I get a ton of shares because people are sharing it saying, like, hey, look at this place. Like, I assume they're, telling their friends or their family, hey, maybe we should go here. So sharing it is probably, I'd say, the third in the list. And then comments. So people writing comments on it that are meaningful. I think there's, like, from what I read, there's actually like a number of letters or characters that is highly or more highly valued than just simply emojis. And then lastly, a like. So like is pretty much, I would say, it's, of course, it's valued, but it's become somewhat worthless, because they think, everybody's just liking everything. So it's these things you can't see, the saves and, that the audience can't see, is the saves and the shares that are really what's driving the, your content to go from just showing to being more viral. Because I've found that my most saved posts and my most shared posts are the ones that I have the most impressions on Explore. And my likes and comments typically have nothing to do with that. So it's interesting in that way. So what I'd say is try to increase those in a way that, people would have the more likelihood to save or share. So yeah, if you added a piece of valuable information to it, they probably want to save it. Or if it's a place that, people haven't seen before, or, an angle of a travel, of a destination, because typically we see all the same photos on Instagram, but coming up with something more unique really will help to have that share and save, because, it's just something that hasn't been watered down as much as, a typical, hey, I took the same photo as, 50 other people. Nothing really sets mine apart. So I'd say, like, understanding that that's how the algorithm works will help you sort of, set your photos in a way that you're adding that value where people will have, the likelihood to save and share. I think that's pretty much it in terms of, like, what I would say is really key on growing and, understanding the algorithm. I do find, having a story to tell as well with stories versus just throwing up images is really helpful. So I literally never post a story. The second I do it, I will gather my story together, and then I will then think of my storyline and then sort of put it on that way. And I think a lot of other influencers do the same. It's never, do it right away, get it up as fast as possible. It's really digest it and think of the story you're telling, because also too, if people swipe past or they exit out of your story, that actually leads to less story views later. You probably have noticed maybe, some stories get way more viral than others. That's typically why, if you, keep somebody's attention through actually telling a story versus just throwing up images, it does help. And that actually helps your post get seen more as well. So if your stories are being well received, and people are watching them throughly, I have found the more story views I have, the better my posts do. The less story views I have, the worse my posts do. And so I've figured out myself what hinders story views. I've found giving people shout outs has actually hindered, because people don't really want to see that. I think people just sort of see a shout out and swipe past and say, okay, I see this too often. Great that you're shouting accounts out, but that doesn't add value to my day. Because, something more exciting is just swipe away. So keeping that in mind really helps your account. And I guess just putting very valuable stuff, like I'd say that's quality over quantity from a even post and a story perspective. So, maybe everybody can relate to that, where you see somebody talking within the tiny little notches at the top for the story. Sometimes you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to that. And you swipe past, and it's actually hindering their account. So I think, like I said, yeah, quality over quantity really helps from both perspectives. And the stories and the posts sort of from what I've noticed are one in the same. The more well-received each of them is, the more well-received the other will be. So yeah, I hope that kind of helps. I mean, there's a lot more, of course, and I know I'm at the 56 minutes point right now, which I plan to only speak for half an hour. But yeah, I hope that helps. And I'm, on Instagram, I'm Lux Teresa. So if you have any questions for me specific to Instagram, I'm happy to, share my knowledge with this community, of course. And yeah, I hope I've been somewhat valuable for you guys today, and what I, brought to the table will help you in some form.
Thank you, Tara. All really good tips. We do have some last couple of questions. Ariane was asking about TripAdvisor. Do you find that TripAdvisor reviews helped increase your brand visibility?
Mm-hmm. I did. I'm at a point now, so I think everybody knows TripAdvisor sort of switched into more of a influencer type community where they verified profiles. So it absolutely helped. I think that a lot of that's where I started essentially, and I think a lot of where my skill set came from a writing perspective, and also taking the photos for TripAdvisor began there. I do have, hotels will ask for TripAdvisor review. They will never ask you for a favorable one, because they can't. But since I've switched to an influencer profile or verified profile on TripAdvisor, I have to be more cautious about what I put there. So it doesn't seem like, any of my stays that I've had are actually a review. But absolutely, I think that the more you contribute there, the more valuable information you contribute there, hotels definitely see it. I've been thanked, after the fact from the hotel. And I do think it has strengthened my relationship with them, knowing that I always have something positive to say about my experience. And I'll always throw in a completely, honest experience and an honest review. But I think that overall, yeah, my pictures that I put up or the review does help strengthen the relationship with the hotel.
Okay. And she has another question here about getting your community. Once you've got your community and you're finding maybe you're getting a lot of comments, hundreds of comments a day, how do you keep up with that? Do you answer every comment that comes through?
I'd like to say that I do. I do. I answer every single message that comes through to me. And I always check my other box, because of course it sort of takes away from the followers the people that you don't follow. So I always answer every message that comes in. I think that's really important, because it creates that relationship with your followers. Comments wise, I mean, meaningful ones, absolutely. Because I think when people are taking the time to comment to me, and it's something valuable, or it's something actually, that I can tell wasn't just whatever, just to add a comment, I do definitely respond. And I am the type that reciprocates. I'm a huge reciprocator. If somebody comments on my post, I've never seen them before, I don't know them, I will go to their page, understand who they are, like, look at their photos, like their photos, comment their photos, because I think that that's been a major component of how I grew. So I'm just giving back. And I think that that's important for smaller accounts, because it's tough to like keep the momentum alive and like keep your spirits high when you feel like you're not growing that quickly. And I get it. And I was there as well. So I'm the type that will always comment back.
Okay, cool. Now, I know we're just almost out of time. Do you have a couple of extra minutes just for a few more questions?
Yeah, of course,
okay,
yeah.
Awesome. And if anyone's watching and needs to get going, no problem. We're going to have this as on replay as well, so you can watch it a bit later. But in terms of creating a really beautiful aesthetic Instagram, do you use editing apps? Or do you always use a preset for your photos, the same preset?
Yeah, so I don't always use the same preset. I do have presets that I go to all the time, because if you look at my feed, I like to have this very dreamy, airy aesthetic and bright colors. So I'll, typically throw a preset on that does most of it. And then I add, different things, because I never have found, because I've used other people's presets too in the beginning, not on my photos, but trying to understand how they worked. I've never seen a one size fits all. It's really, every camera is different, meaning every preset is actually designed for a particular person's camera. So the presets that I made, I mean, I just made them, and I'm a little anxious to give them out, because I have tried them with my friends and family. I've already had people give me good reviews, but I don't want to disappoint people, because it's not always going to look the same, obviously, right? So yeah, they're great. I think they're great as a baseline. I think they really help you, especially, understand what's happening in the photo to make it look a certain way. And yeah, I will apply my preset. Sometimes it looks perfect, and that's great. But if the image is overexposed or underexposed, I'll always have to make, additional tweaks. And sometimes I find my style evolves a little bit, where what I liked before, I, changed it a little bit, because that's, what I'm feeling at the time. So, I think you just figure out what feels good to you, and what, what sort of preset and filter looks good for your personality type. Because I know mine's not for everybody, and I see others where I'm like, nope, that's too dark for me. Like, I like really bright and airy. So yeah, I think it's something that you should always learn on your own, and not just rely on other people's presets, but using them definitely helps, for sure.
Okay. And your photos, you mentioned earlier that sometimes you give the brands, you kind of let them take over the rights of your photos. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more how you do that? Do you always send the original photos to the brand after a trip? Do you have a separate rate when you sell your photos versus when you just offer it as a post?
Yeah, so absolutely, there's always a separate rate. I would say, for the most part, posts are always in exchange for the stay. As I said before, like, I have never had a hotel say, "Oh, give us rights to all these photos, and you can have a free night stay for that." It's typically post 2 to 3 pictures on Instagram and have your trip, comped. And then outside of that, they'll say, "Hey, we need photos of this new pool. We just did the deck." Where we redid the deck, or we'd love to have drone shots of these villas. I typically won't apply my personal presets that I'd use for Instagram. I actually have ones that I understand the hotel would want, because every hotel has a certain look and feel about them. So I will edit them in such a way that they will, appreciate that, because it sort of coincides with the rest of their branding. And so I think does that answer your question? Like,
yeah, that does. And I think we have another question here. Okay, so another question that came through. So in terms of taking photos on a press trip or campaign, what does your typical day look like? Do you, post like your 3, 4, 10 videos or posts or stories? How many do you post? Do you post it while you're there live? Do you sort of schedule them later post-trip over a series of 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. I mean, I will try to get in at least 1 to 2 while I'm there. I'm not the type that posts every single day or multiple times a day. I typically do every 2 to 3 days, because I do find that if you post too often, your posts, what will happen is, if you have a great post, and when you post immediately after, the traction from that earlier one will sort of get lost, because you have a newer post, and you're sort of overshadowing what the views and the impressions that post could get by posting a new one. So yeah, my typical day is pretty crazy because I like to get pictures at sunrise. And so I'll wake up typically when the sun rises, and it's variable in all the places I've been. And you got to get them in a time where the hotel is pretty quiet. So people aren't out of their rooms. They're not going to be in your photos. So that's kind of tricky. So the day starts very early. And then, I'll get a bunch of content. I sort of, pre-plan it before I jump into it. So I might spend the first day that I arrive somewhere really understanding the highlights of the property, and, maybe throwing a drone up to see where photographs well. And we're really understanding what they're looking for from their own digital campaign perspective for like the photos I'm doing outside of my own posts. So yeah, it's really balancing that. And then of course, like weather plays a huge factor. So you're going to have a good day. Usually that's the busiest day and you're not really enjoying the sunshine, unfortunately, because you're trying to get every, bit of content into one great day that you're going to have. But yeah, the days are there. It's no longer vacation for me. It's still a lot of work. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to get the perfect shot or get the perfect, photos for the hotel, because I really value my relationships with them, and I just always want to do the best job. And I think I discount the creative side that I tell myself I don't have. I think I do, but I don't give myself enough credit for it because it's just never been something I ever focused on. It was, like I said, I was always like a math brain, worked in banks, like that was my thing. So yeah, I put a lot of pressure, and I think you just have to spend the time, understand where the perfect shot is, get it done, and then enjoy yourself, because it can be a lot of work and pretty taxing, I'd say.
Yeah, and I agree. And you want to enjoy your stay too while you're there, right? Exactly. So it's a balance.
Yeah, so exactly. Balance is key for sure. And I think, I try to get it all done in one shot. So it's like outfit changes, making it, as quickly as possible so that I feel comfortable that I've got enough. And then I assess my images, and if I feel like I don't have enough, I can always go back and do more like subsequent days. But yeah, the days are crazy typically.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so I think we're just out of time. Thank you so much, Tara, for all your insight and knowledge. You definitely jammed in a lot there, and we covered a lot, and we really appreciate it. Any sort of last words of wisdom?
No, I think just stick with it if you guys are trying to grow. I mean, it is slow, but I can tell you, I started slow, and I'm still shocked of where I'm at today. It did take 3 years to get to this point, but it's crazy because I mean, if you stick with anything, it will compound into something great. And I think that my Instagram is sort of proof of that, because I did not expect it to go in this direction whatsoever. I never expected to be able to stay at a hotel that I loved for free. Never expected to get paid for it eventually. So stick with it and just put your passions there. But I also would say, if you have an income somewhere, that should be your priority. And then, focus on that, an Instagram or something on the side until it can get into that. Don't expect right out the gates that you're going to get paid for things, because I think that, like anything, it takes a pretty strong investment of your time and energy in terms of creating that as a business.
Great advice. Really good tips. Great. Thank you so much, Tara. If anybody wants to reach out to you, they can do that on Instagram. Your Instagram is there on Lux.Teresa, Lux.Teresa, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And if there's any other questions that we may have missed, maybe we can kind of answer them through email quickly and get those out to everyone. Fantastic. And if anyone is watching here and has ideas for future shows, feel free to let us know. We're always looking for show ideas and guest speakers. And I will leave the email in the chat. You can email us and let us know what you've got in mind. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.